It didn't happen.
I think we're ready. Everyone's here, but Austin, who has a medical appointment, I understand, this afternoon. Any revisions to the agenda? Okay. Josh is doing it remotely because some of the information that he's going to be presenting on the mapping he's done is secure, and he can't get it out of our system and bring it up here live. So he's going to do it remotely from upstairs. You want to get into it, Josh? Everybody has seen, Chris, the mapping that we were producing, where all the utilities were and so forth, and the data that goes with it is still being added. There's a lot of data, and Josh can go into that in more detail. Josh?
Thank you, Preston. I really appreciate the time that I can have with you guys to go ahead and show you what we've done so far. Collecting the data has been, it is time consuming, but it's time consuming because we need to make sure that the data that we have is valid. Garbage in, garbage out. With that, I'd like to go ahead and present a little bit of what we're working on. Let's see here. All right. And what you should be seeing now is you should be seeing a very high level map of our assets, our primary assets. Specifically, this one has to relate to our wastewater infrastructure. With that, there is two sections. There's a tabular, and then there's also a graphical representation of each one of those assets. Now, the assets that you see on the screen have lat and long, but they also have elevation data associated with them. That elevation data was combined with the data that Robin and myself, with the guidance of the board, had presented with specifically the flood zones and the proposed compliance timeline. And then what we're working on doing is collecting that data and then presenting it in a format that the board and this committee can go ahead and request on demand that information as it presents as its relevance with each one of the timelines set forth. Case in point, we're looking at we're looking at 4 points right now throughout the city that are in a flood zone AE7, for example. AE7 is proposed to have a compliance timeline of the future elevation of 11.64 feet by, I just had to pick January 1st because it was a date format, but 2030 is what was provided by the board. In addition to that,
25, Josh.
I'm sorry?
Did you say 2030?
That's what I have. Was that incorrect?
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. This is the first time frame. The other one's 2050.
Correct. I've got 2030. I also have 2040 and 2050 as well.
Okay. All right.
Right. I'm just looking at the 2030 points at this particular view. But in addition to the elevation data, we also collect a lot of additional data with each one of these points. So I'm only focusing on pretty much everything from here over. So we are collecting the data. The nice thing is that we can, in a graphical representation, quickly illuminate the points of interest based on what that area of interest was. Then now, again, this is on 2040, 2050. We actually have a few that fall into an oddball, category, which had the parcels overlaid 2 flood zones. And more specifically, that's 4 and 10. those two parcels overlap two flood zones, so they're kind of I it's up to the board of, you know, if they wanted to put it into a single category or if they wanted to just leave it the way it is, and we can certainly identify them individually in the future. Now,
What
this data is
that be? What specific type of utility, I mean, issue is that?
Pump stations. A pump
so
station.
right now, this is all wastewater assets is what we're looking at right now. We're also collecting the data on our
That where you have two zones, trying to decide, you know, what to do
Well,
about
that's
it.
pump station 4 and pump station 10, you said,
correct.
that are spanning them. And the two zones they span, Josh?
Using the example, the four expands in a. Yeah, sorry.
Four was in a X zone and in an AE7 zone. If I'm not mistaken, normally like in the building code, if you have a property that spans in a, say, A zone or an X zone, the most restrictive one always have to apply. So in the case of 4, which I would think would be what you would want to do is use the most restrictive, which would be the AE7. So there are some that's going to be, as Josh said, I think he said 2. I don't know about what 10 is, but
The bottom two, not AE, but it says X, and then it's AE6 is the top one, and then AE7 is the bottom one, but they both fall in X.
Oh, wow.
okay, yeah. So you would want to use the most restrictive, which is an AE zone. The X zone is outside the floodplain or the 100-year.
And on top of it, 2 of our major pump stations.
Correct.
Just a mechanics thing primarily for Josh. So you did basically a point and polygon overlay to determine these connections, these relationships.
Correct.
You look at the topo surface.
That was based on the flood zone that was provided by the
Okay.
feds.
Okay.
So again, I didn't mitigate that. It was just fed data.
So I think Robin's comment answers your initial question then.
Yes. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll reclassify these to the more restrictive zone.
Okay.
Just another question. You used the term compliance. What did you mean by that?
So I'm going to ask Robin to elaborate. Sorry, put you on that.
I don't have the calculations that the committee come up with, but the committee come up with that figure of 3 feet, freeboard. I can't remember the
So
3.
it's just that.
It was 11.64.
So it's a set of conditions that we set up that you're trying to satisfy.
Correct.
Okay.
Using the zone, the flood zone that it's in. So if it's an AE7, I think it's 4.64. So it has to be 11.64. If it's in an A8, if it's in an A8, it has to be 12.64. If it's an A9, it corresponds with what the AE number is.
Thank you.
Correct. This data, as it's being collected, is going to be compiled, and we plan to incorporate that into our billing system, so that way we can associate dollars and cents with this data, not just physical assets. So that way accounting will be able to have numbers with that. That is in the future. I don't know what the time frame is. That is going to be on Austin and Robin's task list, sorry, for lack of better words.
So this is for estimating going forward, is that it?
We are collecting this. All of this data is being collected moving forward. We will not, previously we were only collecting X and Y. Now we will be making sure that we validate the elevation data as well. So that way, at any point in time, this can be collected and queried at will based on whatever model we're looking for.
But you said the dollar number is an estimate of the repairs or upgrades needed.
Right, and that's a conversation with Kim, and I wouldn't want to speak out of turn.
I was just trying to understand what it was, yeah.
Yeah, but we are trying to incorporate those assets into our accounting system. So therefore, we can also provide that information and kind of tie our Esri data with our accounting data, and then we can provide more of a more comprehensive picture for the board to make decisions.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused at what cost numbers.
Gotta get
To your
closer to the
point.
microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're on, but
I'm still a little confused about the cost data also, like press is. Is this for total replacement? Is it for maintenance? Is it a risk number? I'm not quite sure what that number, how that number would be determined and what use we would make of it.
Right. So previously we've just wrapped up our asset management program, or grant program, which collected all of the above of what you just covered. And we have projections, again, those numbers were based on pre-COVID numbers, I believe. So I'm not sure as how accurate they are today. However, the goal was that way we would have some form of, total replacement value, and then we could depreciate accordingly. And again, I'm not trying to speak out of turn of our accounting department, but that was the idea at the time.
Yeah, because I mean, I understand what we did with the asset management program, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, was we have an existing pump station. How long is the pump going to last? The controls, and then put replacement on it. This seems like taking a pump station from X to, X plus whatever, is a totally different number
Yeah.
and something that I'm not sure we can even estimate without doing a true engineering study on how you would stormproof, floodproof pump station. I mean, that's where I'm getting hung up. I think it's good, but I'm not sure.
It reminds me of what Infomart did, that program that they had. Remember that
Right.
spreadsheet that,
That's a great big asset management program.
yeah,
But but only for replacing
key equipment, yeah.
key equipment.
Right.
It's not for ripping out the digester or.
But Tom, not knowing this asset management program, I'm assuming the value of what Josh is presenting is it helps you order and sort of subset all of the assets and prioritize which ones you evaluate to answer the true set of questions, right? The more detailed set of questions, right? So that list that's in blue at the top when Josh first started, it seems to me those are the first ones that you really need to figure out, right? They're the ones that are going to get wet first.
Correct. That was precisely what I was trying to get to. We're just trying to give you a holistic approach. So that way, yes, we are looking at which ones get wet first. However, we're also trying to give you a number to associate with how fast we can replace that. It's just a holistic approach.
Yeah, but
It's just another tool.
I agree, this is a perfect prioritization list, but putting a dollar value of what it takes to put pump station 4 out of harm's way. I don't think any of us,
That'd be a lot
You
of,
guys are
that'd be a lot of
market-
work. I mean,
Josh, you're smarter than I am on this, but I mean, how would you come up with a number for?
I think order of magnitude would be the best you could do.
Right.
You could say, is it a $10,000 job or $100,000 job? But going past that, I think it would take a lot of work and probably not mean a whole lot by the time you're finished.
Yeah, that's the only thing I was pushing back on. We need to do it, but it's just.
Let's talk about that going forward, Josh, and see if it's doable.
Yeah. So I can provide what we've already collected with the asset management grant, and we can kind of take a look and see what we can do with that data, and see how you want to go with move forward with that. It's a
Yeah.
starting point because we already had an engineering study performed on that. They're the GMB is the one that actually calculated these replacement values. So this has already been done. Again, the numbers are probably skewed due to inflationary numbers, but we do have some form of starting point.
Now, this is just the wastewater layer. You have that for another layer for electric and water.
Yes, we are working on finalizing some of the other assets, but yes, we do have it for each one of the other utilities. It's just there's more to look at on our wastewater because that grant that we were working on allowed us to collect this data first.
Okay.
And that because of timelines, we put that ahead of the other
Sure.
utilities.
I'm sort of jumping the gun here, but one of the other items we're going to talk about is the susceptibility, the control thing. I can't remember what it's called. The
SCADA.
maybe it's not on there anymore. It was on the emailed agenda, the cross connection thing.
That's the next topic.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it strikes me from what I understood of that, this application will be very useful for evaluating the water resources, the plumbing.
We'll get into that in a minute because it's not sure how we're going to address that. And that's the reason we're having this meeting to talk about it. If we can do that going forward. And Josh, all this is the information is going to our GIS eventually.
This is our active master plan. So this is being collected and this is live.
Is it being put in as we go, or are we going to come back and put it in?
Both. So we are collecting anything forward. We're making sure that it is crossing or checking every box. And then we are circling back to previous assets where we are missing some of the data. And we are, sorry. And we are circling back around to those assets to collect the missing data. And then we're going to incorporate that going forward.
Okay.
So twofold.
A question about the costs. If what we have are GMB's total replacement cost values, then I would think that in general, that would be a good starting point so that we know, even though they're old numbers, pre-pandemic, pre-supply shortages, at least we know kind of a worst case for some of them. Not for the ones that need a lot of work, but
I'm not sure. What percentage of all the items we've identified has GMB actually put a price on?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can certainly provide you that later.
Everything. So
And GMB probably didn't guess at what it would take to harden it to 11.6.
Right.
They
I
just-
think GMB
what it
looked
was
at
worth.
Yeah.
the pumps
Yeah.
and the control systems and what needed to be done there. But that's very different than building, as Bob just said, a hardened wet well, dry well system or whatever
Right.
to be able to place them in. And, do you have to, you go to submersibles? Yeah. I mean, it seems like you're going from just upkeeping your Chevy to buying.
A submarine.
I like that, Barbara.
I don't want to speak out of turn, and Charlie can certainly speak for himself. However, my understanding was that it was a 1-to-1 replacement.
okay, we'll have to clarify that. And again, see, how accurate or inaccurate that might be at this time and how we would use it. So for hardening issues. So let's talk a little bit more about that going forward.
Absolutely.
Josh, I don't want to pin you down because I know it's a lot of things going on this and you have a lot on your plate. How far do you think we're into this at this point of what we're doing?
So we are collecting, we're going back through and we're collecting all of our as-builts. We're very elementary. I'm not gonna, we're Because it wasn't until recently that we really put a focus on elevation. We do have a lot of the as-built do provide a fair amount of data. We will have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and we will be able to pull that data. However, it was never when we were going through the asset management grant, which helped us. Salisbury University helped us compile this data. Elevation wasn't the primary focus. So that's where we're gonna work off of that data, and then we're gonna add that vertical information. So we're hoping that we can, although we're not going to start from scratch. We will have to go back through the majority of the data.
Josh has a lot on his plate. All our IT and everything he handles. So this is something he's been working on. So he works on it when he can. And it's this not a high priority compared to some of the things he's working on. So I just, are we at 10%, 20%, 50%? What do you think?
If I had to, based on the information we have, probably somewhere around 15%.
Okay.
As far as vertical elevation, as far as total assets, we've already collected probably 95%.
Okay.
So we know where they're at. We just need to collect a little bit more information on each one of them.
Okay. Okay.
And not to try to drill down too deeply, but you said 15% total, but on the wastewater side, I assume we're much further along on that.
We are, yeah. So again, we're identifying the major assets first, the lift stations, the pump stations, etc. And we're working out from there. So it's just like we started at 30,000 and we work our way down till we can get to each one of the granular assets, each pump within each station, etc. But so that way we don't feel overwhelmed in trying to inundate our staff in order to collect every little piece of information right out of the gate. So each point is going to have to be visited probably several times over the course of this entire process. So it's a living, breathing, working kind of situation.
I like your choice of words, inundation and working our way down. I assume that's the -10.
We will get there. I just want to provide the most accurate information I can to the board and to this committee.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody have any additional questions?
I have a question. Does this include the sewer piping and manholes also? I know that you guys done a lot of work on that. And I didn't know if
we do have additional, we do have a lot more data. So when I start filling it in, oh, wait, you can't. Sorry, let me share my screen real quick. When I start adding additional layers to the assets, you can see it fill in significantly. And so we do have, these are our assets, and we will be collecting additional information based on, the majority of the information is going to be based on as-builts. And then as we collect new structures, such as new developments, can't think of it, new developments, such as Tower Hill and Lewes Waterfront Preserve. As we're collecting that, we're actually collecting the vertical assets as well. So we're trying to pull that in new all of the way, all of the asset information, and then we'll be going back and revisiting some of these older ones.
But I guess the question is, I think where Mark's going with this, like, do we have every manhole and say, I know whether the cover is a watertight cover or not, so we can be assured that we don't have manhole covers with vented holes in them and so forth.
Right. So if I answered yes, I'd hope you'd call me out on it. We don't have that. But those are some of the questions that we'll ask from you, as far as what level of information you would like to collect.
a lot of work's been done in that regard already.
Yeah.
Also, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
we have a policy that, that all the ones in the floodplain have to be sealed or have at least a salad bowl in them to stop infiltration, but I'm not sure we know where everyone is. Do you have any feel for that, Robin?
No, I'm pretty sure they've not been identified.
Yeah, but I think the policy's been that if they're in a flood prone area in general, they either have a sealed top or a decent insert.
I'll say I've pulled a few manholes throughout that grant, and I would say a large percentage of them had those bowls in them. But we can collect that data as well.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to know too.
So, Press and Mark, if we ever got to the point of having totally sealed manholes throughout the system, what's the secondary issue?
All the houses are vented,
Right,
so it's not as if it's sealed.
right, I recognize that,
Atmosphere.
but, the older houses still have traps in them. So you got a water trap.
But the sinks and so forth, but not at the main
So
discharge.
the question would be whether the sea level rise would reach one of the openings in a house, a toilet, shower drain, that if that water level got to that, no matter how well you sealed your manholes and your sewers, you're going to have a very, very heavy flow.
I was thinking more of the entrapment of methane gas in the sewer lines. And, if you have sewer pipes that have got slight dips.
Hose in them or something.
Yeah, and,
I don't
you
often
have
see
heard-
that. Don't often see that, and because most everything is vented through the houses.
Yeah.
The people have a stack at each house.
right, and I don't remember when the plumbing code changed that you didn't need a whole house trap.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 70s, I remember putting plumbing systems in and we were still putting
The
traps.
main trap?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I would think.
Yeah, that's
that would-
not-
That would collect crap.
Oh, yeah, that was the
Yeah,
main,
yeah.
that was the
It
main
was-
source of,
Yeah, that's a big income for many sewer people.
yeah. I mean,
Cleaning
there's-
those traps.
The old trap was a U trap.
Yeah.
And then there was a vent outside to
Yeah.
vent
Yeah,
the septic tank or a sewer, and then the inside. Oh, come on, Press, you're
Oh,
old.
well, no, I'm just thinking back when I first started, the first source system we put in, it was in Bethany. And there's a guy in the firm who was either a genius or a fruitcake. And he designed the source at the end of like a cul-de-sac. He had a 10-foot vent. Hey, but Dudley, you don't have to.
what was
do
that fella's name?
Dudley. Dudley. What is that name? But
All right.
that's not needed. The bottom line is it's not needed because all the houses have vents today. There might be a few left. I
There
don't know.
may be some left.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you when we demolished our house it had a trap.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there might be. Jeff, Josh, you have anything else?
Not at this time. I just nothing more than just the guidance of working with Robin and yourself as far as what additional information you'd like for us to collect that we're not collecting, and I'll just look to you.
Great. Well, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Come see us sometime.
I'll be there real soon.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, Robin, you've been heading up this cross-connection effort, and I think everybody's seen the draft, what's going on, but I guess the question came up, if we have the anti-siphon valves being used, if it's in a flood-prone area, what happens when you flood it? You could cross-connection back into the house if we have that. And we haven't been able to get an answer. Evidently, places like Florida or other places that are prone to it don't seem to be addressing it.
That's the thing. A lot of things I've been looking up, a lot of municipalities, when this was brought up, kind of more related to like irrigation systems that require to have the backflow prevention installed. Normally the manufacturer requirements say it's got to be 12 inches above the highest point. Normally the irrigations are all at grade level, so 12 inches above the grade, it's all it's required to do. The concern is in the floodplain. What if you have something that, 2 foot of water, that device is going to allow water to backflow in all the ones, I think, except for one that I looked at, and it was a place in New York, and I can't even remember where it was, added an extra foot. Everybody else just said whatever the manufacturer said. Speaking with Bill Haig from Rural Water Association here in Delaware, and even Jerry, the company we've been dealing with, the HydroCorp, they were based in Florida, I think, at one time, their main base. Most of the backflow, most of the cross connection plans, they don't address that. They just say, put it in as the specs say. I mean, when me and Press was talking about it, I think overall this plan, as I put it in my email, the requirement for backflow prevention devices has been in the plumbing code and the building code for years. Now the state has enacted these regulations to say, look, we want to better monitor these things. You got to make an inventory. You got to make sure they're being tested. They got to be tested and looked at by a certified individual, and we want record keeping. So again, we've contracted with HydroCorp, and they're kind of coordinating with us to implement the plan and help us through the process of making sure we keep the records right. When they were looking at all this, even when I looked at Rehoboth's plan doesn't address anything above what the manufacturer requires. My thought was, instead of putting in this plan, because this plan is more geared towards testing and what's the requirement for testing and inspections and things like that, put in general terms that it just has to follow our specs or our policies. Then in our policies, put the specifications in there that we need. This plan would then say, look, you have to follow the manufacturer specifications, any regulations by the state, and any regulations by BPW. But then we can reference that our specs say this is what it's got to be. I'm not saying it doesn't have to be done and any additional requirements needed, but I don't know if we need it in this plan. I think as long as we generalize it as it's in our policies, then we can keep all of our specifications for everything that we do with meter pits, piping, and things like that. And that's why it's all there. Again, to go back to the original comment was, I can't find anything in a lot of places that even address it other than it says this manufacturer specification.
So when I read through the materials that you shared with us, I thought, how many meetings has Mark brought up this point about shower drains and toilets and stuff? It sounds like a real problem that needs to be fixed. If I understand it, this is a plan whereby you can help to seal up all those possible points of intrusion. But the question is,
I'm gonna stop you, because this only pertains to the water. This doesn't pertain to sewer.
Okay.
This is only the water system.
Okay.
So
So
again,
this
what
gets
Mark is speaking
perfect,
of,
thank you.
yes, it would be.
Thank you. That helps a lot. So then the question where I was headed with that was, given the size of these things, what's the opportunity? What kind of risk is there really for intrusion? My limited zero engineering background would suggest these are pressurized systems. They shouldn't allow for a whole lot of water to get back in.
A lot of the smaller devices is what like on the irrigation. I'll go back to the house irrigations. There are some concerns I think Press has brought up about some of the old outside faucets that they call them. They call them boiler drains, silcocks, whatever. Didn't have any anti-siphon devices on them. The newer ones are required to have them. So if it happens, it's going to back out through the vacuum breaker that are there. But some of the older ones don't. So if somebody winterizes their house, opens that drain, leaves it open in the wintertime, we have a major storm, water gets back in there. in our meter pits, we have double check valves or dual check valves in the meter pits. So it's not going to get back in our system directly,
But it could do damage
but
to the house.
but it could go into the house side. Some of the arguments could be, well, we're responsible for our system. We're not responsible for homeowners. Homeowners could cut in things that we don't know about, that we'll never know. As long as we have that safety device at our service line entrance to the property, that's what we're responsible for monitoring and maintaining.
But Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought part of the logic was also a system failure. We lose our pumps and you depressurize the city lines.
Okay,
You then can draw back.
that makes sense.
Or
Yeah,
even
that's
if you
all
have-
part of it.
even
Yeah.
if you have a fire hydrant there and a major fire and sucking a lot of water, you could pull some
Yeah, so,
back the
fair
other
enough.
way.
and,
Right.
with fire suppression systems in houses, you now have standpipes basically in a house 30 feet tall. You got 15 feet of back pressure there. Which, doesn't give you a lot of margin to system drops. So it's multifaceted. It's what Robin said, and I think it's also several communities down south have had this where the systems went down and they then had boil water orders. And along those lines, have you talked with Georgetown about what their proposed ordinance changes?
No, I haven't. I've been talking a lot with Kevin from Rehoboth, because again, when this originally came up, when Austin asked me to look into this, I jumped right on talking to Kevin since they're so close. It would have been nice if we kind of keep our ordinances somewhat relatively the same.
It's just what Georgetown Council is going to be taking up right now. They're looking to change the ordinance to allow for inspections inside the house, the same things we're
Okay.
coming across.
Yeah, I can follow up with them.
It's an interesting thing. I have a mound in my front yard, stepped up mound, and I have irrigation up there, and that's a couple feet off the ground. So theoretically, I'd have to have my backflow up as high as the top of that mound.
Yeah, normally I think it's normally at least 12 inches above that highest point.
Yeah.
I as I was reading through it, having lived over by the beach for a while, I'm imagining a whole lot of plumbers are going to get contracted for a whole lot of work in order to meet the intent of this program.
Yeah, this is retrofitting. It's just not new.
Yeah, correct. That's
It's everything.
yeah, because and the majority, if overall, if you don't have an irrigation system of some sort, if you don't have fire suppression system, this is probably more leaning towards commercial end and high hazards in a residential, which are the irrigations and the fire suppression. So if you don't have a lot of that, I would say a lot of the homeowners are not even going to be affected by this, other than the initial survey to say, are you?
Well, there's a lot of irrigation systems.
Yeah, but the irrigation ones are going to have to be, but again, realistically, if you look at it, if the big word, if the plumber or the landscaping company who put it in followed the code at the time, it's code compliant anyway to the existing code.
But the risk is elevation. They're
Correct.
all below
Yeah,
grade.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so.
But it doesn't address this plan itself only addresses identifying that if there's a potential for a hazard and putting in the actual device that needs to be put in. So we're not going to be going back to these homeowners that have an existing system and tell them now you got to raise it up if they meet the requirements.
Yeah, my house is 18 years old. It doesn't have.
Correct. Because probably at that time the
Doesn't go
plumbing.
back that far.
Yeah. The plan itself, I don't think it was designed to, the state only wants to monitor these things. And if there's nothing on your irrigation, it's the requirement is going to be, you have to put something on there.
Yeah.
And, the other thing we've talked about inside the board is how we would react to a storm. you know, at what point would we start isolating parts of the system? And that would then, once again, on the water side, drop the pressure to zero.
Which then makes all this vulnerability a lot closer to happening.
Yeah,
Well, and luckily it wouldn't be the rest of the system if we isolate, but it would mean that restoring
Yeah.
post-event, you'd have to go through
the water,
the chlorination.
yeah, the whole system.
The whole
That's-
system.
Yeah, that. So it's just something that kind of bothers me. This is for preventing cross contamination, but it could be a major problem if we get flooding because the potential for it to go into these things. And there's enough of them to worry me. I mean, it does happen. I've read things from over the years about the cross contamination. Golf courses and things like that are particularly prone to doing this type of thing, but I haven't seen much recently. And I don't see most of the houses in town that have them already. Anybody that has a dual meters, one for irrigation, should have it on there.
Correct, because because that would have been, the irrigation system would have probably been more recent.
Yeah.
And would have been required to follow the codes which required the backflow prevention.
Right.
Again, it's just,
So again, mine, when I built my house up with the irrigation in, and it still wasn't required back at that time, at least.
so once we pass this, press can be the first.
I should have my mouth.
That's right. That's right. I've got it down now.
And, you know, one of the other complications, one of the other complications is that while the building code requires that you put vacuum breakers on bibs, hose bibs, a lot of people leave hoses attached
Mhm.
with shutoffs at the end of them, which completely, then the valve is open, which means that the vacuum breaker now is a port directly out. And, you know,
So, having
Right.
just heard Josh's presentation, I'm assuming that there's opportunity for prioritizing. I hate that word, but being able to focus on pieces of the system, particularly in the lowest elevations, most susceptible to flooding, for even just the information campaign that I'm imagining that goes with this.
I think from what Josh was talking about and what was previously was done is that was more for our system only. And I'm not saying it's not for our system and our stuff too, but this is more for the house side of stuff. So this is kind of a different, geared
So
toward a different.
having worked with the technology that Josh was showing earlier for many years, I mean, while you're talking, I'm imagining tying the edge of the house to elevation to target, which houses are likely to be candidates where this could be a problem and offer some of the challenges that Tom's been talking about. The first cut is which houses are in the floodplain, right? Just like you
Yeah.
did with the pits and the assets, right? The next is which of those houses are likely to pretty much meet the needs versus those that probably really need some additional work. I'm assuming age of house or some other factors could be worked out. Maybe it's not worth getting into it now.
Everybody's gonna have to be surveyed, right?
Yes,
Every-
that is
every-
correct.
All right.
Every customer.
Yep.
And how long, have they given you any idea how long that would take to get all that data put together?
Well,
It's a big
from
job.
talking to HydroCorp again, the sooner the better we get this plan implemented, the sooner we can start. The first steps in the process is public outreach and education. Before we even send letters out saying, people are going to be scared enough as it is, because it's automatically think, oh, wow, this is going to be a huge cost to me. Again, those that are not in a residential with high hazard won't even be affected. They're just going to have to do a survey, or survey's going to be done, and you get marked off the list and you move on. The ones that have something that could cause potentially the cross connection.
Primarily irrigation.
Yeah,
probably.
correct. Are going to have to be checked. You might meet the current system, the requirements, and you're fine. The testing part of it for some of these devices that need to be tested are going to be another thing, that because they have to be done yearly.
Yeah, it's an expense to the
Homeowner, it's,
now,
everything's gonna be expensive a
an
homeowner.
annual testing of their system.
Correct.
So in the game of education, and I'm going to raise my backyard as an example. I've been building drip irrigation systems to supply, containers around our yard. Do you have a best practices thing that goes out to homeowners, and maybe it came and it went into the trash before I saw it? Something that would help answer for example, the point he made about the hose connected to the new hose bib with the proper valve on it, but it's been disengaged, bypassed by having a closed stopcock at the end of a hose. Do you have those kinds of things in a document?
I don't, as far as I know, nothing has been sent out previously. There's going to be now probably with
Okay.
this going into effect. So there will be more and more outreach and more education, and it can be a continued thing. I know HydroCorp does have some literature and stuff that there's going to be presented once the plan comes in place, the outreach probably, they're thinking 6 months of outreach before they even start with a letter saying, okay, now we're gonna have to start doing the surveying. The biggest ones are probably, again, they're going to be geared towards the commercial because they're the most potential for causing any issues. Besides probably SPI, BB, some of the ones, we don't have a lot of industrial, like some of these big cities do, which could be more potential of an issue. Yes, we have commercial, so they're going to have to be checked out also. Are some of the commercial buildings a little older that maybe don't have these backflow preventions? Yep. And they're going to be talking to Newcastle County, the Municipal Service Commission up there. They've had a backflow prevention plan in place for years, he said, and they're still going after some of their commercial because of the cost.
I guess people with pools too, that's something
Yeah.
you gotta worry about.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
I know somebody putting a cistern in.
yeah, it could be.
Because they're gonna have to have supplemental water when the cistern's not filling
Mm-hmm.
up by rainwater. So
Who's
that's
doing that?
your neighbor, your new neighbor.
Yes. So I think the biggest thing is just maybe,
Because of an old neighbor.
yeah, maybe the mitigation team to be involved in, is there something the mitigation committee would like to look at as far as maybe putting before the board a policy or, a recommendation to say, okay, let's make sure that these things are raised up if they're in floodplain. And maybe that's something the committee can look into.
Just to comment on the thing you said early on, I like the idea of having a policy where you're setting some of the details and you refer to the policy in the plan. I really like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just easier to put all your specifications and stuff somewhere in one place instead of people having to look 4 or 5 different places to try to find your specifications. So reference it in here, reference it in other documents, but then put them all in the specs.
Yeah, I just brought this up to committee because, I worry about it. I actually think this policy is, good on one hand, but I think it could be very harmful. I think you could have more chances of having backflow now, once it's put into as a requirement than we presently have.
Because you get poor installation?
No, over the years, the flooding,
Oh, okay.
and we didn't have much flooding in this past storm, fortunately. I mean, internally. But I could see, I've been in this house 8 years and I think I've had 3 floodings been knee high under my house. And they were over the spigots and everything outside the faucets. So I could see going forward the potential of this causing more problems than it's going to solve. Because you really don't hear this happening too often. And I know it can and does, but
It will.
Well, but you don't
Yeah.
mean that the policy is gonna cause the problem. You mean climate change is causing the problem.
well, yeah, but if we endorse this policy, I'm afraid it's going to facilitate that.
That's the part I'm missing out.
What will it
Well, if we
facilitate,
put 'em in-
Russ?
No, it wouldn't, if we don't put these things in, the backflow wouldn't wouldn't happen in these siphon breakers. So we're,
Oh, that's what,
we're putting it in.
but it wouldn't prevent
Oh, no,
all the rest of the.
no. I just that I guess.
Water's coming, whether we do this or not.
I know. So.
Yeah.
So I wonder what the long-term impact's going to be when we start having more frequent storms and more frequent flooding. But they don't seem to care about it down Florida, Georgia,
And
places
you
like
see
that.
them all over the place and they're basically
They're
just.
above
regular-
ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's surprising,
Yeah.
but yeah, and as, like I said, and when you brought that up, when I brought it up to Bill and Jerry from HydroCorp, they kind of looked surprised, like, well, maybe it's not that much of an issue, and that's how it seemed like it
You
happened.
have to lose the positive pressure on
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
correct.
source side
Yeah.
for it to flow back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So if they're cognizant of it and they can maintain that positive pressure, that's a method of prevention, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
So is there a way to have some sort of simple, efficient monitoring program that would allow you to confirm that everything's working as it is? I mean, like, I get the tests for, testing my tap water and sending it off to the lab. Are there parameters that are in those tests, or are there similar sort of relatively painless things that could be done for us to be able to confirm that in fact the system is staying under pressure and it's not backflowing? I'm assuming salinity would be the thing you'd look at, but maybe there's some other indicator in the water quality in the pipes.
having annual inspections of the systems hopefully will be the biggest preventer. Yeah.
I mean, otherwise you're trying to catch, an event. It's not a continuous thing.
Yeah, again, I'm thinking like a guy that's got a mapping system behind me that would be able to see patterns in results. But again, we don't have that. But I'm just wondering if there's a way of simply cost effectively monitoring the system just to make sure that in fact it's working the way we think it's working. It may be too expensive to do. I don't even know what parameters or how you do it. I'm just throwing it
You'd
out there.
almost have to do that at each inspection because it could be house by house.
Right. And it would have to be some sort of periodic thing.
Yeah.
It's just an indication.
If you
That's all.
monitor line pressure and see if there's any dips in line pressure, then you could go out into the field and see if it created a situation where there was a problem. But if there's high line pressure, then the flow back isn't going to happen.
But we, for the most part, we hear back from our residents, if we have low line pressure, they'll start complaining before. driving out.
There you go. That's where I was headed with that.
Yeah.
Are there ways, are there indicators?
We do know that there are areas of town, and we've got them in our capital budget, where we do have low line pressure, where we're providing, additional cross connects or, the second water tower is all to address this. So, I mean, as I remember, New Road is probably
Somewhere out
one
there.
of the lowest. So your margin to having positive pressure to a 3-story house is kind of.
And I mean, there are relatively inexpensive devices that can give you a continuous, a transducer in effect that's placed on the water piping that gives you a readout on pressure, and you're going to be alarmed.
Well,
That's
Is
an
this
expense, but
something,
it's not the huge expense of.
That's the kind of thing I was imagining.
is this something that AMI for water lines would help? We're talking about AMI for electric, but what about, I know
Well,
Austin has mentioned,
The AMI hubs on the electric
uh-huh,
will pick up the meter readings from the water lines. But there's a limited range on how far you can be from them, and whether there are transducers that are compatible with them, that I'm not sure of. And one of the big problems with the AMI one of the technical obstacles we have to overcome is we don't necessarily believe that we have full coverage in town to support AMI. That's part of what needs to go with the package. because if it's cell phone based and it's below ground, we have areas where we have spotty coverage.
Mark, what you were talking about, measuring the pressures, these new water distribution systems for houses, they have the header, what do they call that? Do you know, Robin, where you get it like, the 1 inch line coming in and then into a header and tubes go to each fixture in the
PEX.
house.
It's like a manifold, yeah, a manifold system in
And-
a central location.
And I know at least one person that got that system has a pressure gauge right on it. It's part of it. I don't know if that's standard or not.
No, it's not. It's an option. I didn't put one in, but yeah, but
Whether
that's
it-
what I have in the house.
Oh, that's right. You did.
Whether it's connected to a central point that can alarm and things like that
Yeah.
is, I'm sure, something that could be worked out
Yeah, you should put it-
without, it doesn't sound like it's overly burdensome. It's burdensome, but not over.
Yeah, but you have a maintenance cost and a calibration cost ongoing associated with.
Ongoing.
I'm not saying no, but I mean, it's, I think it needs to be looked at.
It's luckily the transducers themselves are devices now that are pretty bomb-proof but it's still it's still a system that needs to be maintained. Every gizmo
And
needs
the
to
other,
be maintained.
the other question about that is that would it get you out of the state requirement? Because if it doesn't get out of the state regulation, then it's just,
I'm sure.
You make your own regulations a little more stringent, then that might be able to be encompassed, but
I'm sure the like the alarm companies could have sensors on that. I just put in a new system that simply say where you put it in yourself. It was really neat. And like they have the temperature, you can have that monitored and I got a panic button, a little thing you put on the floor to, if in case it gets wet, the alarm goes off. All kinds of simple things. They're only a couple bucks a piece. I mean, like $5 to $10 each sensor. So I'm sure putting on a pressure sensor wouldn't be
yeah, I
hard to
don't
do.
think
Pressure, wouldn't be
the
hard to
capital
do.
costs are probably not too exorbitant.
Yeah.
You still have a maintenance cost that you have to deal with.
All right. Robin, thanks.
Mhm.
I don't think we answered the question, but we can think about it. So
What are we gonna do with this?
well, I don't know what to do with it. I don't think nobody's addressing it that I know. If we could do it, I think we would have to bend the resident requirements.
I mean, this is a board discussion
Yes.
and, we've been doing it and I
Yeah, but I
can't
mean,
remember if it's on this board meeting or not.
Well, it's just a discussion. I'm still going through, as I noted in the email, that I'm still going through some of the committee, the board members' recommendations for changes. So I'm going through that and hopefully in the next meeting.
well, now what I was saying, I know this has gone through. I mean, I'm
Right.
not questioning that, but how do we address the potential cross connections during flooding? I don't know whether we
Yeah,
address that.
that's,
I think at some point you're gonna say to the public, in the event we're gonna shut down the incoming pumps on the waste treatment plant. And we're gonna shut them down in this area first or second or third, and you are on your own. And being forewarned, these are things that you should maybe pay attention to. And you send that out a couple of times, you'll probably find some digging and back pressures and, what should I do? But I think at some point, after you kind of work out the details and your actual specs, because as Robin points out, 12 inches isn't going to, the manufacturer's spec isn't going to do any good with the 3-foot flood, like at the corner of, Savannah and Cedar 3 times a year. So I think you're going to end up doing something like, here's what we're going to do in the event of a big superstorm Sandy or Jonas that hits us directly. And we're going to shut this down and that's going to cause this. And your house might need some protection. And these are the kinds of protections we recommend. But I think you're going to, you're gonna have to get it out of polite conversation and into the hands of the homeowners or property owners or businesses.
We had a conversation in probably the last mitigation meeting about some of what Bob's saying, and I remember Austin talking about shutting power off. And I was thinking about just what you went through, Bob, just on Saturday. And I could imagine a bunch of people in the most vulnerable areas saying, well, I guess it's time to buck up and get a UPS for the house. You know, I don't know if that works. I mean, how many people have automatic switching generators and all that, but we had a conversation about this at the dinner table, actually. Don't ask me how or why, but you know, flooding, I've been watching flooding for years. I'm very sensitive to it. I worry about it, maybe excessively, but
Well,
you know, there are people, I think, who will expect to have power. You know, they're not going to take kindly to having the power shut off or the water shut off or whatever.
and if you use a CPAP.
Right.
And it needs to be charged every, I don't know. Or you have an oxygen generator. You might need to be making arrangements.
To evacuate, I mean, they may have to
Well, and-
evacuate to a hotel or a neighbor or family.
So, I mean, I think everyone knows with this Ophelia that just went through, we had like 3 minor outages and they were all pole top failures. So I think people, maybe for lack of a better word, a little complacent in that our crews do a phenomenal job of maintaining the system and responding during the events. And that's good and bad because it means that, I mean, it's great that we're doing it. It's bad because people then come to expect it.
Right. When
And
there's
when-
water across all the roads, that's going to get a lot tougher.
Oh, yeah.
And when Philippe comes next week,
Don't go there.
I'm going to contact Newcastle County and see what they've got going up there.
Yeah.
You mentioned Newcastle County might have something, I can,
Yeah, they have a current plan and I spoke with them about a year or so ago and
okay,
they were looking to update their plan, I think, at that time. Again, I'm not sure if they met all of the state requirements, but they had one in place for many years, they said.
yeah, that's fine.
Do we have a drop dead schedule when we have to have all this done and up and operating?
You got to have your plan in place by February 1st, 2024. It's got to be in place.
Okay, but how about the inspections completed and the whole thing?
As of right now, they're only worried about you getting the plan together. I'm not saying that the state won't come down after February and say, okay, now everybody had this plan. So we're going to give you a year to get the inventory done. I don't know that. It's just the plan needs to be in place. So the sooner we get the plan approved, the sooner we can get ahead of the game and start.
Yeah.
Again, because HydroCorp is they would like to have 6 months of outreach. So we can get everybody, the residents aware.
I'm sure we'll get some pushback on this.
HydroCorp is putting the plan together.
They're helping us implement the plan. This
Okay.
draft plan, a lot of that came from them through
Okay.
other policies or other plans that they've done.
We're basically hiring them to implement the plan.
And they've coordinated everything through the Delaware Rural Water Association. They're sponsors of Delaware Rural Water Show.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Robin, since Austin said you would pick up this next one too. That's
Yeah,
everybody has seen the information that was sent out, and could you kind of review exactly what's happened?
yeah, kind of on the same line as what the cross connection is, just talking about sea level rise and things like that. Also myself and Eric attended a Tri-Association conference in Ocean City at the end of August. One of the classes that they had was strengthening climate resiliency with EPA's creating resilient water utilities. Kind of gave a brief insight on that program And as that paperwork, that fact sheet that came out, the climate resiliency evaluation tool to CREAT. After that seminar was over, Austin went and talked to the presenter. After that conversation, a couple emails, and we decided to schedule a meeting with them. A virtual meeting that was also attended with press and Barbara there. They asked us some questions about ourselves a little bit. We provided an overall synopsis of our operations, the layout of our lands, being in the floodplain. Some of it is, some of it isn't, and some of the challenges that we are facing with flooding and sea level rise. The EPA came back and kind of provided some information on this initiative, this what they call it, creating resilient water utilities system. It provides tools, training, some technical assistance to help us with a better understanding of our vulnerabilities and how we're affected by climate change impacts. They help this initiative also comes up and can identify some adaptation strategies, how to implement some your different options, and even possible funding to do this. I didn't really get into the program. Aubrey, who was from the EPA, she was at the meeting. She sent an email after the initial meeting and provided that information, the case studies. And they've done some projects throughout the United States. Most recently, they've done in Cambridge, Crisfield, and Chesapeake Beach, I think. Yeah, was the ones. There was the three.
Yeah.
They are very interested in us getting involved and helping us out, whether it's done through individually just through the city of Lewes, or more of a kind of a local regional with other beach towns to kind of. So hopefully, I think the board, I think Austin made some contacts to some of the board members, and I think the board wants to go through with this process to help, with any kind of assistance we can get from the EPA's, and they seem to be all on board. Right now, we're waiting on some further follow-up from the EPA on the next steps, timing, and things like that on how we get the program going.
We officially notified them, or we waiting for them for?
No, there was an email that came back from Aubrey that was done on got the email or somewhere. I can't remember when she sent it back. We had our meeting on September 8th, and I think on the 11th she sent an email back saying excited to work with a chance to work with you. She'll let her colleague know, and they'll respond back with the next steps, expectation, and timing. She also sent in there's a couple links to the EPA website that had some good case studies other than just there. What I can do is I can forward those links to you. She also put in there about noting there's some information about $19 million in federal money for drinking water systems infrastructure resiliency and sustainability grant program. So don't know if that's something we can look into, but they would be more than willing to give us all the information on that.
I have a couple questions. One, an apology. I used to work for the EPA. EPA, like no other agency, loves to dream up cute acronyms to describe programs. I used to be the program manager for such a program. One, Aubrey, is she from the region or is she from the national headquarters?
I think she was from national headquarters. I think
Okay.
I think so though.
Okay. You could probably tell if she gave you a phone number and area code. That would take care of it.
I don't think there was anything on the emails that had that.
Having been intrigued by what you sent, I went and followed some of the links and some of the documents and found some of the other local sites that they've been working with. I was telling Barbara about, there were a series of YouTube videos where they talked with managers of facilities of various scales, like you guys. And the thing that really caught my attention, well, first of all, two thoughts. When I first started reading this, I'm thinking, well, we've been down a bunch of this. We've kind of checked a bunch of these boxes. Maybe not exactly the same way.
I think they were
They're-
impressed with where we were when we talked to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
But the thing that really got me excited, and maybe I get too easily excited about this kind of stuff, is the integration. There were a couple of these early partners that had the diverse set of responsibilities that you have, and they were figuring out ways of solving problems across the set of responsibilities all at once. You know, as an example, somebody had modified their sewage treatment plant and in the process realized the electrical costs and an opportunity to put solar panels over all the tanks. You know, another case where they were recovering biogas to help, again, keep it out of the air, but also to support the energy needs of the plant. You know, I realize none of these things may be cost effective, but at least it was cool to see the way they were putting it all together, right? Solving electrical problems, solving water supply problems, solving wastewater problems, where there were opportunities to collaborate. Anyway, I think it's great. I hope we find some really good stuff.
Yeah,
to
it
work
appears like it's going to be very, very useful.
And of course, the Chris Field, the ones you just those are the kinds of examples we should be paying attention to.
Mhm.
They're the leaders in dealing with sea level rise.
I was interested. I'd love to see the backup data because I don't know where a lot of this stuff came from. And you must speak EPA pretty well because it took me a while to digest this thing.
Again, my bet is there's a contractor or several that were involved in putting together this fabulous package of goodies. One of the challenges is making sure that the data that are behind this really comprehensive model are good enough to meet the needs of the board. But the approach it's hard to argue against the approach.
Yeah, one of the things in there was it's more for you water utilities, but they have, I mean, I just looked through they've got infrastructure investment from Fargo, North Dakota, Minnesota, California. They even talked about in environmental justice, Trenton Waterworks, sewer plants. There's just going on that website was just looking at some of the studies was just that. Again, I can send you that link and then I'll send the members that link that she sent. And you can just look through all that.
They mentioned that we have to produce stuff for them.
Yeah, correct.
I think this committee should be into that in spades.
I'm in.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, because they were talking just roughly like, I think she said 35 to 40 hours of staff time would be needed to help to assist them. They would be more willing to come down. I think they would really want to come down. She was talking about 4 or 5 virtual meetings, couple hours long or calls on sites. Overall, she was talking about 2 to 4 months, I think, to complete the study, and then they would get all that. We would have access to all the information. We could go online, and so it does seem like it's.
As it states, it should help getting grants too.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And the nice thing about getting in at this time is they're trying to develop and prove a model that they want to see happen everywhere. To be an early engager, adopter, they get as much from it as we do because they get to add our set of issues and ideas to the mix. It further strengthens their selling it to every other community.
Yeah, and I was pleased that they were talking 2 to 3 months versus a typical government program, which could go on for. And I mean, that shows, to your point, Sumner, that they're actively involved in engaging, and they want to set precedent. So
They're eager for partners who can show the value of the program.
Now, their fact sheet does say 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, I think for total end, because then she
Yeah.
said something about once you get all the information, it would take like 3 months for them to
Yeah.
do that through their portion of it.
Yeah, there was a data collection
Yeah.
portion.
Yes.
But 2 to 3 months for still an agency to
Yes.
digest and come back with something.
Light speed.
How long did they tell you it's gonna take to get back to us?
She didn't say, she just said they will follow up.
That's-
So it's been,
That'll be
it's been,
the first.
it's been a couple weeks, so I'm pretty sure Boston he's got it on his calendar to kind of hit him up as soon as possible. But again, from just as probably Preston Barbara can say, they seem to be very, very interested in
Yeah.
us
Yeah, they
wanting to be
were,
involved.
but they did also say that the timing would be later in the year.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
It is already later in the year.
Well, this was from early September, so.
All right, I guess everybody's in on this, so I think it's a perfect fit for this committee. You're, I guess you and Bob, your commitment, and Summer, are you involved with the city's committee too?
Which,
The environmental committee?
No,
maybe I'll get involved. I'm not at the present
okay.
time.
I
I
just-
mean, a lot of the issues I'm very familiar with.
Okay, well,
Really?
I assume you're taking stuff back to that committee too, to what we're doing and bringing stuff forward to us going forward about what they're doing. They've been doing some.
I think so,
interesting stuff.
but the environmental subcommittee at least has sort of a list of about 8 or 10 topics that they're studying and sort of chugging through at this point. And
Well, we don't want to know about all of them, but anything that pertains to us certainly would.
yeah,
The purposes of them are to develop and modify ordinances, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I would think that, we were talking on the way over, I mean, there's definitely a lot of like we were talking about stormwater, but several of them, it struck me would touch on stormwater, for example.
yeah, that's one of them. But it hasn't been started or addressed yet.
yeah, just like the energy efficiency piece hasn't been addressed yet, but at the workshop, there was an awful lot of support for solar, an awful lot of support for undergrounding the wires. Those, I think, were the two biggest areas that I heard.
Another one that's relevant to BPW at some point is going to be dark sky.
Yeah.
And somebody will be probably appointed to go talk to BPW board and say, how about dark skies? And you're all free to say, what?
Well, I can say is that we maintain and install streetlights. We do not set lumens. We do not set the standards. That is totally the city. And while we may or may not, and I think you know where I stand, support dark skies, that is a city decision. And we will implement what the city tells us to.
Okay, and the city will probably
Correct.
say,
No, exactly.
well, what does BPW think about that?
Yeah, that's,
Well, then you say.
I think we could say that we appreciate it
Oh, yeah.
and we'll do whatever you want us to do that you need,
So,
but it's not our responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, whether to go to bollard lighting, lower wattage lighting, shielded lighting, all those things, are city decisions. And
The Powelltown Village, I think, approached us. I guess Darren was still here then. I don't know. Austin would know, but they came to us about dark skies too, and we told them the same thing. We'd be glad to put them in. I mean, we're glad to be involved with it, but we're not the ones that are, selecting them and so forth.
well, I'm just saying that that's coming at
Yeah.
in some
And
fashion.
same thing with EV charging stations. We're just going to be providing power to wherever they want the EV stations. We're not going to be selecting them or installing them.
Interestingly, there wasn't much interest in that, EV charging stations. I think maybe because some of those people had EVs and they do the charging at home. But
we're
they're not there yet.
a tourist town.
Yeah. I think Ted said a while ago that he was going to put it at the end.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so I don't, that's the only one that I'm familiar with.
There is talk from the city side to put chargers right outside. They're right outside in the parking lot for the police department. They were gonna put it down.
Just for the police department?
No, they're gonna be for public.
My only problem is that parking lot's packed already.
Yeah.
There's about a dozen
Understand
about a dozen cop cars in there and.
that
trucks.
the original plan was to put it at Otis Smith, but then floodplain. So the next option was right out here.
But that's, again, it's tough enough to park out here. I see a lot of.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
from this building. Can't even.
All that line across there is supposed to be, half of it's supposed to be for the police staff and the other half is supposed to be for the police cars. Evidently, there's going to be some spots opened up because now some of the police officers are allowed take-home cars. So there's going to be less in and out. But it's
What
still
about
pretty
pump
fast.
stations?
I see a lot of city vehicles now down in Franklin there in the parking lot down there.
That's where they're requested to,
Yeah.
to park. So the church used to let them park there, which they still do, but the church has, I think, have a lot more functions than what they used to. So they have to regulate, they have to come to the city and say, look, you got to move your cars on Tuesday because we have a funeral or we have something going on. So I think the city just said, use the parking lot down there.
The BPW had an agreement with the church. You know, that piece of property between the house that's being renovated there on Franklin and the residence on the corner? That's the church property. And BPW had an agreement with the pastor over there that if we paved it, that we could use it and they could use it on the weekends when they had the services. It became kind of expensive for us. I think the city was at some point earlier on, I'm not sure the same administration had some interest in it, but I haven't seen that any.
Then this-
I think the last time we-
came back
yeah.
and Retracted,
Yeah, the church has rescinded that agreement.
Oh,
Yeah,
I missed that.
about a month or two ago.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't hear that.
So,
yeah. They're still, I think they
didn't see
finally
that.
did a formal,
I
said
didn't
we want to rescind the agreement, I think.
because we were gonna put EV chargers there and we were gonna pay for the street light, the parking lot light and pave it. But
Paving was really expensive though.
the church is,
Because I think the pavers are going to be, or paving was going to be porous and could be, yeah. So I think the cost was just got to a point where,
Where we couldn't.
So
yeah,
Barbara and Bob, you mentioned, Bob, that there was some interest in doing some forest canopy stuff. I mean, every time I think about the crossover between BPW and planning, forest cover and the cooling effects that comes from having more asphalt cover with trees is, I mean, it just makes sense. I can't imagine how it wouldn't make sense to how many kilowatt hours are burnt cooling houses that are out in the hot sun. But was there any talk about any of that?
Well, there's a lot of talk on not getting involved with what the tree committee has done. So to maybe summarize, there's an environmental subcommittee that had this list of 8 or 9, 10 projects. The two that are ready to go and basically being discussed at the next planning commission meeting are pervious, impervious, and lot coverage. And
Floodplain.
and another change, which no applause necessary from Sumner or Tom, but would in the floodplain add an additional 18 inches of freeboard to the building permit. So those are going to be discussed at the next planning commission. And presumably presented to mayor and city council and go through that. Behind that, there's another group of discussions. The tree committee's got one also at the next planning commission about trees on new developments and a certain density. And they are working on tree protection during construction. Okay, but that's probably not quite ready. Unless, it may be by the next meeting. So all of that kind of body of stuff will move through city council at whatever speed is appropriate. And then the subcommittee will go back on its next group of topics, which Barbara helped me, but dark sky,
Pesticides and herbicides, wildlife corridors. Yeah,
Stormwater management is on that list.
yeah.
There's some others.
One thing that came up at the table I was at that I didn't know how to answer, there were people who said that, why did BPW cut down all the trees in the corridor going to Fisher's Cove?
So BPW did not. BPW had no control over it. That was a city permitting. It was done as part of the agreement when the city approved the plans administratively. I was contacted by many people out there. I went out and looked. There were 7 major trees. However, they were randomly placed, and whether you could have even directionally bored through them was questionable, on top of the fact that there was a maintenance issue, and on top of the fact that you had to go back and renegotiated the approved plans, which had a whole set of other issues. BPW had no involvement with that whatsoever.
So
Just to
BPW
clarify,
didn't
that was-
suggest it?
No.
That's the utility easement for the.
Yeah, well, it's a
project.
combination utility and walking easement
Okay.
to get from Fisher Cove to the canal side.
I
will speak
suspected
personally.
as much, but I didn't know for sure, so
I will express my personal opinion, which is that it was a major loss. I mean,
Yes.
those trees were all 18 to 24-inch girth. And, but I will say no more about it. The one thing I will say on Sumner on the tree canopy, I think you know where I stand on it, but that is not something the BPW has any involvement in, other than our routine tree pruning program for our lines. And
I'd see you being the recipient of whatever canopy enlargement programs in terms of reduced demand for electricity. That's all. That's the only connection I'm making.
yeah, and the choosing of appropriate trees in appropriate places so they don't become a long-term maintenance issue.
Right. And having worked with the city of Wilmington's urban tree program, there are lots of resources out to help pick the trees that belong in street locations as opposed to interior locations. Not every tree belongs in every place.
Correct.
All right. Anybody have anything else? And I don't think we'll set a meeting at a date for another meeting until we know. I think the next thing is to figure out where this is going, the EPA thing. And at those meetings, I'll get Josh or whoever to bring us up to speed on what else we're doing here. But so we'll just wait until we know what's happening, and then schedule a meeting when it's okay for everybody.
So that'd be 2025.
It could be. I think I'm still on the board then. Yeah. I'll be away for the next couple of weeks, but you probably don't have to catch up with me anyway. But I can be reached, but I'll be out. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Opposed?